All right, let's just jump right into this explainer, shall we? Today, we're exploring a really fascinating mystery. Why do we humans sometimes purposely choose to do the exact wrong thing? I mean, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Those weird moments when you totally rebel against common sense and morality. It's this profound puzzle that's literally captivated psychologists, philosophers, and theologians for centuries. So we're going to unpack why, even when evolution and basic logic are screaming at us to behave, we just don't. And the crazy part? It's not a mistake. We do it completely on purpose. So to kick things off, we got to talk about what researchers call micro-perversity. This perfectly captures those completely unexplainable urges to, say, randomly steal your friend's French fry, or just poke their dessert. During a project where they collected everyday examples of this, one guy actually confessed to walking with a buddy, looking at his friend's ice cream and thinking, man, it would be so messed up if I just stuck my finger in that. So he did it. And when his friend was like, why did you do that? He literally had no answer other than, I don't know, I just wanted to do something messed up. Another person admitted to stepping on the grass right next to a giant "Do not walk on the grass" sign, just because it was there. It's these mild, seemingly pointless little acts of conscious rule-breaking that actually open the door to understanding a much, much deeper human drive.
So, here's our roadmap for the explainer today. We're going to cover 1. The puzzle of perversity. 2. Monsters and chaos. 3. The need for autonomy. 4. The strategic madman. And finally, 5. The value of chaos. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the puzzle of perversity, or doing wrong for wrong's sake.
To really get why we rebel against the very forces of evolution that are designed to keep us alive, we need to look back at history. From a pure survival standpoint, right, natural selection should wire us to always act in our own rational self-interest. But we don't. And this is brilliantly illustrated by St. Augustine. Long ago, he confessed that he didn't steal pears because he was hungry. He did it simply because he wanted to be bad. In his famous Confessions, he starts this chapter promising to reveal his absolute worst, most evil actions. But instead of some grand, shocking crime, he talks about going into an orchard with a buddy and stealing some pears. That's the whole shebang. But what really haunted Augustine was the why. He wasn't even hungry. In fact, he threw the pears to some pigs. Unlike a crime driven by a physical need, this act had zero motivation other than the sheer, undeniable desire to just be bad.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the stark contrast. While animals definitely make functional mistakes, acting purposely perverse, that is a uniquely human invention. In evolutionary research, there really is no direct equivalent in the animal kingdom. Sure, other primates do good things and bad things, and they obviously make mistakes, but they aren't purposefully perverse. Perversity is something that only popped up once humans evolved this rich set of cognitive tools, things like social intelligence, moral motivations, and the ability to imagine the future. Once we got that toolbox, it suddenly occurred to us, hey, wait a minute, I can choose to act up. It's this individual discovery that every single one of us makes at some point.
Which brings us to Section 2, Monsters and Chaos, or Why We Break the System.
Let's explore some of the psychological theories that try to explain these destructive behaviors when everyday life is just, well, failing us. Because sometimes, breaking the whole system feels like the only way out. This brings us to the hopeful monster theory. It suggests that when absolutely everything in your life is a disaster, an extreme, seemingly perverse leap might actually be your best shot at finding a better way to live. The term actually comes from evolutionary biology. This idea that a massive genetic mutation usually fails, but just occasionally it creates a radically superior adaptation. While biologists debate that, psychologically, it makes total sense. Think about it. If your life is going well, you just make small tweaks, right? But if literally everything you try blows up in your face and you have nothing left to lose, taking a massive, irrational leap, like suddenly quitting your job or ending a long relationship completely out of the blue, might be a perverse act where the potential payoff finally outweighs the cost of failing.
But we definitely need to separate true perversity from intrusive thoughts. You know, like that sudden glitchy urge to spill a massive secret just because a really loud voice in your head keeps yelling at you not to? We all get these weird flashes, right? The urge to jump from a high balcony or randomly push someone on the subway, even though we know we would absolutely never do it. Sometimes, all this constant self-monitoring just creates a brain glitch. For example, people who are terrified of sounding prejudiced might accidentally blurt out something horrible just because they're over-monitoring themselves so intensely. Or, if you're holding on to a secret, the voice in your head screaming, "Don't say it," can actually make you say it. But here's the thing. While these glitches make you do the exact opposite of what you want, they aren't true expressions of deliberate, chosen perversity.
So researchers actually developed this thing called the need for chaos scale to figure out who literally wants to watch the world burn. And the demographic trends they found are super interesting. They asked people if they agreed with wild statements like, "I think society should be burnt to the ground," or "Sometimes I see something beautiful and I just wish it would go away," and look at what they found. Young people score higher than older people. Men score higher than women. And, get this, people on the extreme edges of politics score the absolute highest. And it actually doesn't matter if you're on the extreme left or the extreme right. The data shows that if you have a deep-seated need to just mess things up, you'll naturally gravitate toward the fringes of the political spectrum.
All right, moving on to Section 3, the need for autonomy and proving we aren't just algorithms. Now we're arriving at the absolute core revelation of this whole explainer, the fundamental human drive to prove our own free will. This is arguably the most powerful explanation for why we act out. The crucial concept here is reactance theory. It completely explains why, say, demanding that college students not binge drink or forcing people to get a vaccine often paradoxically makes them want to do the exact opposite. If I'm planning to walk out a specific door and suddenly someone orders me to use that exact door, I might just turn around and pick a different one. Why? Because nobody tells me what to do, right? If we just do the completely rational, moral thing every single time, we start to feel like we could just be replaced by a computer program. Doing the exact opposite of what's demanded of us is our deeply human way of proving that we are the ones in charge of our own choices. And if we map this intense need for autonomy across a normal lifespan, we can clearly see the perversity totally spikes during these key transition periods of deep uncertainty. I mean, toddlers are famously perverse, right? They will pick a screaming fight filled with absolute rage over something completely ridiculous just to flex their tiny little wills. Then, boom, we see it spike again in adolescence, this huge period of transition where breaking the rules helps you figure out who you even are. And then finally, the classic midlife crisis. This is when people look at their perfectly predictable, safe lives and think, wait, is this it? That urge to push back results in sudden drastic career changes or, buying a sports car they definitely can't afford.
Now, while teenagers might use perversity to look unpredictable and cool, thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre pointed out that true autonomy is very often a totally private rebellion. It's just to show ourselves we aren't mindless machines. Sure, breaking the rules in public can signal to everyone that you aren't a square, and it can actually help you climb the social ladder by looking a little dangerous, but the absolute deepest form of this perversity, it's completely private. It's breaking a rule when absolutely no one is watching, not to show off, but simply to prove to your own self that you are a free agent, capable of completely independent action.
Let's slide into Section 4, the strategic madman and the very real advantage of being unpredictable.
So let's see how all this builds into game theory, where injecting just a little bit of chaos suddenly becomes a massive strategic superpower. In life, and especially in things like poker, being perfectly rational makes you an incredibly easy target. But a little bit of craziness? That makes your threats significantly more intimidating. Think about it. If you're entirely rational, everyone knows exactly what you're going to do. You become totally predictable. That is exactly why the best poker players in the world always throw a healthy degree of randomness and, well, perversity into their game. If you're known to be just a little bit unhinged and willing to make the wrong move just for the heck of it, suddenly your opponents are forced to take your wildest bluffs very, very seriously.
A truly perfect historical example of this is Richard Nixon's famous madman theory of politics. The idea was that giving your adversary the impression that you are completely nuts actually gives you a massive edge. Look, if an enemy knows you're perfectly rational, they're just going to ignore any threats that would obviously harm you as much as them. But if they believe you're a perverse agent, someone who might just push the button even if it destroys your own interests, well, suddenly your totally unrealistic threats hold terrifying weight in geopolitical negotiations.
And that brings us to our final stop, Section 5, the value of chaos in culture, art, and creativity. Finally, let's just zoom out for a second to see how these individual, totally unpredictable acts shape our culture at large. Like, what role does perversity actually play in the grand scheme of society? Well, the art world, for one, historically prizes perversity. It heavily relies on these audacious acts of creative destruction to push boundaries and capture our imaginations. Back in the day, when Marcel Duchamp literally submitted a standard plumbing urinal titled Fountain to a fine art exhibition, it was an act of pure distilled perversity, but it effectively birthed modern art. Or consider Banksy. His famous painting, Girl with Balloon, was auctioned off at Sotheby's only for a hidden machine inside the frame to switch on the exact moment the gavel dropped. It shredded half the canvas right in front of this horrified elite audience. And you know what happened? That willful act of destruction made the piece infinitely more valuable.
It just goes to show how imaginative rule-breaking can genuinely drive human creativity forward. Now, before we wrap up, I do want to make one thing absolutely clear. We must draw a stark line between doing something bad for a logical goal and doing it purely to cause suffering, because perverse evil has absolutely zero redeeming value. We are definitely not celebrating cruelty here. A lot of evil out there is functional, like someone robs a bank because they want the money. It's obviously bad, but it makes logical sense. Perverse evil, though, is so much darker. Think of Batman's butler Alfred describing the Joker. Some men just want to watch the world burn. People like that cause suffering not to achieve a goal, but simply for the joy of the destruction itself. And there is absolutely no good in that form of perversity.
So I'm going to leave you with this thought to chew on. While 99% of the time you absolutely should be a rational, moral person, isn't the world just a little bit more fun when we add a tiny drop of chaos? Being rational is, without a doubt, the smartest way to live a good life. But if we are 100% predictable, we kind of lose a little piece of our humanity, don't we? A little micro-perversity, a super small harmless act of rebellion, it just proves our autonomy. So I have to ask you, are you going to just follow your programming today, or are you going to prove your free will and steal your friend's French fry? Think about it. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope you enjoyed it.